Imagine this. You're in a heated conversation. Your heart races. Your mind floods with arguments, ready to fire like arrows. You feel the urge to respond, to defend yourself, to prove you're right. What if I told you, the moment you want to respond, you've already surrendered? We live in a world that teaches us strength is about speaking up, having the last word, asserting ourselves at every opportunity. But Nietzsche saw it differently. To him, true power isn't in speaking louder. It's in knowing when not to speak at all. Modern psychology agrees. That desperate urge to react, it's not strength. It's your limbic brain, your primal, emotional center, firing in fear. But silence, deliberate silence, is something else entirely. It isn't weakness, it's mastery. And if you can stop reacting like a puppet pulled by invisible strings, then what are you? If you've ever felt controlled by your need to respond, to defend, to be understood, then this exploration of Nietzschean philosophy is for you. Subscribe now to discover the psychological tools that transform weakness into unshakable inner strength. Nietzsche had a name for that, and you're about to meet him. In today's world, we are surrounded by noise. Everyone is talking. Everyone is reacting. Social media platforms have become arenas of constant opinion, a race to be louder, faster, more visible. Every second, someone is live streaming their response, debating online, chasing the next hit of attention. But what few realize is that the loudest voice is rarely the most powerful. In fact, the people who speak the most are often not trying to communicate. They're trying to be seen. They're seeking validation. And that's the paradox. Because needing to be heard is often just fear in disguise. It reveals an inner insecurity, a dependency on external approval. Nietzsche saw this clearly. To him, true power wasn't in constant expression, but in the choice to hold it back, to observe, to remain centered while others fall into chaos, to stay silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because you choose not to say it. Silence, used with intention, génère un unique psychological effect. It creates discomfort. And discomfort, when placed in the right moment, forces people to think. Think of the people who've truly impacted you. Were they the ones who spoke endlessly, or the ones who, with just a few words, measured, deliberate, left an impression that stayed with you in the noise of modern life? Silence is rare, and what is rare becomes valuable. But this isn't just about personal branding. There is something deeper at work. Silence shifts the dynamic of control. When you speak less, your words become heavier. They carry intention, weight, direction, and silence does something else, too. It unsettles those who need the noise. It strips away their comfort of knowing where you stand, of knowing what you're thinking, of guessing what you'll do next. It turns you into an enigma, something the reactive mind cannot decode. This is why silence is so misunderstood. It looks like passivity, but in reality, it's discipline, it's restraint, it's psychological positioning. The modern world rewards impulsive reaction. Click, type, comment, argue, post. But that entire cycle is driven by dopamine, a neurochemical loop designed to reward reaction, not reflection. And the more you react, the more predictable you become. The more you speak, the easier you are to decode. Those who break that pattern, who resist the reflex to speak for attention, begin to operate on an entirely different level. They gain leverage. Because when they finally choose to speak, people listen, not out of politeness, but because the silence that came before has already done the work. So ask yourself honestly, are you speaking because you have something meaningful to say, or are you speaking because you cannot bear the silence? Because in a world addicted to noise, silence is not absence. It's presence. It's control. It's power. And if that's true, then the next question is even more important. Why does silence unsettle people so much? Because what looks like nothing just might be the strongest move on the board. Silence does something most people aren't prepared for. It interrupts the script. In conversation, in conflict, in negotiation, there's an unspoken rhythm, a call and response. You say something, I respond. You react, I counter. But what happens when that rhythm breaks? What happens when the response never comes? Suddenly, the other person is left suspended, hanging in uncertainty. Their mind begins to race. They replay what they said. They search for meaning where none has been given. This isn't coincidence. It's biology. The human brain is wired to predict. It's constantly filling in the blanks, trying to anticipate the next word, the next move, the next emotion. So when you stay silent, when you remove the expected reaction, you're disrupting that predictive loop. And what fills that gap is doubt. Did you misunderstand? Are you angry? Are you judging them? Do you know something they don't? The mind spirals. And in that spiral, people reveal more than they ever intended. They over-explain. They second-guess. They expose their insecurities. Not because you forced them to, but because your silence gave them space to unravel. Nietzsche understood this intuitively. To him, silence wasn't passive. It was confrontational, a mirror, reflecting the other person back at themselves. And this isn't just Western thought. Eastern philosophy, Taoism, Zen, has long embraced silence, not as absence, but as presence without ego. In Taoist thought, the sage does not contend. The sage observes. And in that stillness, truth is revealed. When you don't rush to defend yourself, when you don't take the bait, you create a vacuum. But here's the key. That vacuum becomes a pressure point. Because most people can't tolerate silence. To them, silence is not neutral. It feels like judgment. It feels like rejection. It feels like power. And it is. Because in that moment, when you remain calm, composed, still, you've broken the pattern. You've shifted the dynamic. You're no longer reacting. You're controlling the pace. And what happens next is predictable. The loud try to speak louder. They fill the space with noise, hoping to regain control. But in doing so, they reveal even more. They become transparent, predictable, weak. You, on the other hand, remain composed. Because silence, when used deliberately, is more than restraint. It's precision. It's tactical. And most importantly, it's rare. In a world that rewards speed and noise, stillness becomes a weapon. Not one that wounds, but one that exposes. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, asks for a reaction, demands your defense, we consider this. The real power might be in not giving them what they expect. Because nothing disarms the reactive like someone who refuses to play their game. And the louder they get, the more your silence says. Let them talk. Let them explain. Let them unravel. You just hold the line. Because silence, in the right hands, is not just absence of sound, it's psychological dominance. Now, of course, not everyone can sit in silence. Most will panic. They'll speak just to fill the void. Because for them, silence is accusation. Silence is confrontation. Silence is power they don't know how to respond to. And that's the point. There is a rare kind of strength, a level of inner power so complete, it no longer depends on being understood. Nietzsche called this the Übermensch, the overman, the one who rises above the herd, not through arrogance, but through self-mastery. The Übermensch is not loud, not reactive, not desperate to explain. He does not beg to be accepted. He does not crave to be seen. He exists on his own terms. And one of his greatest weapons is silence. In the face of provocation, he doesn't retaliate it. In the presence of misunderstanding, he doesn't correct. Because he understands something most people never will. That needing to be understood is just another form of dependence. When you rely on others to validate your choices, to approve of your path, to agree with your truth, you've already given away your power. This level of psychological independence isn't just philosophy. It's a complete transformation of identity. If you're ready to break free from the need for approval and validation, subscribe to explore the advanced psychological concepts that create true inner sovereignty. But the Ubermensch, he reclaims that power through stillness, through distance, through silence. And that silence is not empty. It is full of presence. It speaks without words. It confronts without aggression. It reverses the power dynamic. No reaction, no explanation, no justification, just presence. And that terrifies them. Uncontainable, uncontrollable. And society fears what it cannot control. History is full of thinkers who embodied this. Socrates, who said little, asked questions, and let others reveal themselves. Kierkegaard, who embraced being misunderstood, who wrote under pseudonyms, not to confuse, but to protect the truth from premature understanding. These were not men chasing applause. They accepted the truth often walks alone, and they were willing to walk with it, even if no one followed. Now, ask yourself, do you have the courage to be misunderstood? Can you resist the urge to clarify, to explain, when someone twists your words or doubts your choices? Because that urge, that reflex to correct, is not strength. It's fear. Fear of isolation. Fear of being unseen. Fear of being rejected by the collective. But the Übermensch does not fear being alone. He has already faced that silence and emerged whole. His silence is not an absence of identity. It is the signature of sovereignty. And that is why he is so disruptive. Because in a world built on reaction and approval, he represents something dangerous. Someone who no longer plays by the old rules. His presence says, I don't need your agreement. I don't need your permission. I am not here to be liked. I am here to be. But to reach that level, you must overcome a hidden adversary. One Nietzsche believed to be the true root of weakness, the need to be heard. Because once you let go of that need, you become untouchable. Most people don't speak to communicate. They speak to escape. They fear silence. Not because it's empty, but because it reveals too much. Silence leaves them alone with their thoughts, their doubts, their unresolved questions. So they fill the space with words. Any words. They talk not to express clarity, but to avoid the discomfort of self-reflection. This addiction to noise is one of the defining features of our time. Today, it wears a digital face. Endless scrolling, reaction videos, heated TikTok debates that go nowhere. Everyone is talking. No one is listening. But the real cost is internal. Nietzsche warned us. He saw that this compulsive need to speak, to be heard, to be validated, wasn't strength. It was servitude, a quiet kind of slavery, not of the body, but of the self. He called it a psychological prison, a life built around the need for external approval. And once you depend on others to define your value, you've already lost control of it. Carl Jung took this even further. He believed that much of what we say, especially when we speak too much, is a way to avoid confronting what he called the shadow. The shadow is the part we lock away, then decorate the cage so we forget it's there. And talking becomes a smokescreen, a fog meant to hide the things we fear to face, a way to drown out the parts of us we don't want to see. But silence forces confrontation. When you're silent, you have no choice but to sit with what's there, to hear your inner dialogue, to face the truth you've been avoiding. That's why verbal addiction is so dangerous. It keeps you busy enough to never look inward. And it convinces you that being understood is the same as being whole. But they're not the same. Many people spend their lives trying to be understood, to explain themselves to everyone around them, chasing validation like oxygen. But the more you explain, the more you become dependent on being accepted. And dependence is never strength. The truth is, most conversations are not about connection. They're about reassurance. They're about saying, please see me. Please accept me. Please tell me I'm right. And Nietzsche would argue, that is the language of weakness. Because when your identity is held together by constant confirmation, it only takes one moment of silence to make it fall apart. So, ask yourself honestly, are you speaking to connect, or are you speaking to avoid silence, to avoid judgment, to avoid yourself? Because if excessive speaking is a symptom of dependency, then silence, real, chosen, deliberate silence, must be the gateway to inner sovereignty. The kind that does not shift with opinion. The kind that does not break under pressure. The kind that does not fear being misunderstood. And if you want to be free, you must break your addiction to words. Because silence is not emptiness. It is the space where real identity is born. History. over silence begins with a simple question. Can you pause? Not forever. Not indefinitely. Just long enough to choose your response instead of surrendering to your impulse. Most people don't react because they've thought. They react because they've felt. And unchecked emotion is the engine of noise. Noise in conversation. Noise in conflict. Noise in the mind. But the discipline of silence is not about shutting down. It's about tuning in. It's the art of observing before engaging, of asking, does this need a response? Does this deserve one? And in most cases, the answer is no. Because the moment you stop reacting to everything, you regain your leverage. You become emotionally still. What some might call emotional coldness. But in truth, it's not cold at all. It's clarity. It's control. It's the strength to wait. To speak only when speaking has a reason. In Buddhist philosophy, this is known as right speech. Say only what is true. Say only what is useful. Say only what brings clarity or compassion. The rest is noise. And noise is cheap. When you learn to speak less, your words begin to matter more. You're not just heard, you're felt. Because people know when you choose to speak, you mean it. But this takes practice, because silence confronts you. And most people aren't ready to meet who's waiting in that silence. We're conditioned to fill every space, to respond, to explain, to defend. So here's a challenge. A 24-heure discipline. No reactive speech. No justifying yourself. No jumping into conversations that don't require you. Observe. Pause. Speak only when you've chosen to. Track. What happens? Notice how others respond. Notice how much of what you usually say is just habit, not necessity. Notice how much power lies in saying nothing at all. This is not about disappearing. This is about becoming intentional. Because the person who can wait, who can sit in silence without flinching, is the one who controls the rhythm of any room. They don't need to raise their voice. They don't chase recognition. They let others exhaust themselves while they conserve energy, waiting for the precise moment to strike with calm authority. This discipline of silence is one of the most advanced forms of psychological mastery. If you're committed to developing this level of inner control and strategic thinking, subscribe to continue exploring the deep philosophical practices that create unshakable strength. This is the discipline of not reacting. And it's one of the most underrated strengths in modern life. In a world where speed is worshipped, slowness becomes a power move. In a world where everyone talks, listening becomes revolutionary. And in a world addicted to attention, being self-contained becomes radical. But let's be clear, this is not a tactic. It's not a gimmick. It's not about appearing mysterious. It's a way of living. A way of moving through the world without being moved by it. And only those who are willing to face themselves in silence can walk this path to its end. When was the last time you chose silence when every part of you wanted to speak? Not out of fear, not out of indifference, but because you were in control. Most people will never know that kind of silence. They'll speak to fill space. They'll explain, defend, argue, because they cannot bear the tension of being still. But here's the truth. Silence is the final gate. The weak pass by it. The strong pass through it. The Übermensch doesn't need to be understood. He doesn't need to justify himself. And neither do you. So, here's your challenge. For the next 24 hours, no reacting, no explaining, no trying to convince. Let silence speak for you. Watch how people respond. Watch how much power returns to you the moment you stop giving it away. And if this message challenged you, if it made you think twice before your next word, you're ready for what comes next. Because silence is just the beginning. In the next episode, we'll dive deeper into the mindset of freedom, not just through silence, but through detachment. Subscribe to continue this journey into Nietzschean philosophy and the psychology of true strength. See you there.